press this one. All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. We are here and going and ready and all the things. I apologize in advance if all of a sudden my connection goes wonky. We're very hopeful that my hotspot will hold out this morning, but that's okay. I love how we can do our business anywhere, and this includes book club. So there's a gym behind me, and I will be going into it as soon as we are done. Anyway, so we have Successful Women Think Differently. We are on habit 3 today. Yeah. Oh, and Janelle's here. That's awesome. We are missing Sherry Grant this morning, so I would love it if you guys could have your cameras on and be ready to interact and give some feedback, because otherwise I'm just talking to myself, and that's not as exciting, because I was actually really excited for our conversation this morning surrounding this chapter. So we are talking about, like I said, habit 3, stop trying to fix your weaknesses. And so I want everyone to take a deep breath and have that that title give you a little bit of hope here this morning, because I think, and especially since all of us here in the room today are women, and I think everybody is moms. I think we've got all moms. Yes, am I wrong? I think we're moms. Okay. So is it just me, or is motherhood like a gigantic spotlight on your weaknesses sometimes? Especially when you see them repeated in your children. And you're like, oh, so that's how that comes across. If anyone, does anyone have an example of something that just, yoy, I can give you a good example while you guys are thinking. So my daughter Lauren, if you've never met Lauren, is me. And I actually would love to bring her to Plexus stuff, because I think it would freak everyone out how much she is like me. And Janelle's like, yes, she is, because Janelle knows my daughter. But she has issues paying attention. And it sometimes will drive me insane, but I'm like, hey, sweetie, you know what? It's you. Like, this is you. It is not necessarily something that behaviorally you've passed down, but genetically. So like, this can be, you can absolve yourself a little bit from this too. You can be like, okay, this is just genetic. Like, we're just like blue eyes and blonde hair. It is genetic. So can anyone think of anything else like that?
My son and I have the exact same, somewhat, depending on the time and the company, inappropriate sense of humor. He'll crack a joke and I'll be like, oh, you didn't read the room. And then I'm like, oh, but I'm laughing because I find it extremely funny.
And you could probably continue on with it, right?
Yes.
I feel like our whole family has that inappropriate thing. We should all hang out a little bit more often. Have you guys seen those memes where it's like you have that one friend that you should never sit beside at a funeral or something like that? Like, it's me. It's me. I'm the problem. Hi. Yeah. So this morning we are going to talk a little bit about weakness, but we are going to talk about how you don't need to obsess about what those weaknesses are, and you can start building on those right things. So the key lessons from this, I'm just going to read from the top here. Identify and embrace your strengths. Find ways to use your strengths to conquer challenges. Build confidence by only using words that strengthen you, not weaken you. And learn to speak well of yourself. Okay. So guys, there was so much of this that was just so phenomenal. And of course, she's got the self-coaching stuff. Like, this whole chapter was all self-coaching. But hold on, I'm just looking for this. My first question for you guys is, in what ways do you focus too much on your weaknesses?
Hey, I'm just grabbing a coffee, but um yeah, this chapter, it it had some highs and lows, and I when you say, when, focusing on your weaknesses, of course you focus on your weaknesses when you fail at something, you go, oh, man, like if I only was better at this, or whatever. Like, I think as a kid, more or less, some of the times that you remember that you failed, and let's say it's just, I'm just picking something, but you lost at a race or something, right? And probably, as a kid, you're like, wow, if I was faster, but maybe I didn't train either, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's like, yeah, picking those weaknesses out is, I think, when you come to a place where you feel like you failed at something. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it
I
seems like I was just gonna say, it seems like the fallout from the weakness or the loss is so much bigger than the excitement from the gain sometimes. Sorry, Chelsea, what were you going to say?
sorry.
No.
I still do not have my driver's license because I am terrified of crashing and killing my entire family. So that's something we need to work on. But I just can't bring myself to, like, I have my learners, but I just can't bring myself to drive very much, especially not in like a town or city. Just because I fell asleep at the wheel once when we were driving. Thankfully, it was at night and there was like nobody on the road. And the rumble strips woke me up. And so I was like, wow. I just, like, my eyes glaze over when I'm driving and my brain is in another space and I'm trying to focus on driving, but it's just not interesting enough. And so then my brain is like, let's think about something else. But I'm like, I need to focus. I can't, I don't know. It's hard for me and I'm not exactly sure how I'm gonna overcome it, but I'm not ready to work on it just yet, but it's on the list. So
Hey, if anyone's writing down prayer requests for just in general, if you've got a log, that could go on our prayer requests, you guys. We could pray for Chelsea to be bold and to have some healing in her mind and all of those things. So Chelsea, thank you for sharing that. That'll definitely be on my mind for sure. Anyone else want to share what ways we focus too much on our weaknesses?
I have to say, for me, in my volunteer role at the church, and I'm a service director, so I'm up in the tech booth. I am not a very techie person. I don't own a cell phone. I have no plans on owning a cell phone. So, and they stick me up to be one of the ones in charge. Well, I was put into the place of setting up our slides, our announcements, the sermon slides, and everything for the church. And so the tech director showed me a few things, and then I came in and I just kind of played around and tried to figure it out. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to get this. I am so not techie. I'm never going to get this. I went in on Wednesday and I had one other tech person who's kind of, if I'm not able to do it, she's going to take over. We got most of it done except for the sermon slides in an hour. And then I went in on the next night on the Thursday, and in just under an hour, I was able to get all the sermon slides done up and it's all ready to go. So
I think
I guess I'm a little more techie.
I think you're gonna have to stop saying you're not a techie person.
Yes.
Maybe you can say I'm not naturally inclined to understand technology, but I have the capacity to learn. Because I would say that, yeah, saying I'm not a techie person, that is focusing on the you know what? I almost think, Janelle, that's more like saying like, I'm not a doctory person. Like, as in like, I'm not a doctor. Well, of course you're not a doctor because you didn't go to school to be a doctor. You didn't read the books to become a doctor, or you're not a lawyery person because you didn't read the books or go to school or take the bar. So now that you have done the things, you are not actually averse or allergic to being techie savvy, right? So yeah, but I love that you're growing. I love that attitude of like being willing to embrace that growth instead of just saying, like Janelle could have said, no, I can't do that. I'll be a service director, but I'm not touching that. I'm not doing pro presenter. I'm not. Like, I have said, I'm too squirrely. Don't give the worship leader buttons to press to advance slides. It's not a good idea, you guys. Like, I'm like up there worshiping and I'm like, oh, people need words. That's not okay. Yeah, so I want to read a little bit here that I just found so encouraging. And actually, it's like inspired a reel for my brain for today. Speaking of techie stuff. Bottom of page 74 says, so much of self-help, coaching, and psychology has been about helping people figure out and fix what's wrong with them so they can finally be more successful. But both scripture and research shows that when you focus on building your innate strengths rather than fixing your weaknesses, success flows more easily and authentically. Believe it or not, there's power in being imperfect if you identify and use your unique strengths to overcome your so-called weaknesses. And then I love this quote by Peter Drucker. He says, the ageless essence of leadership is to create an alignment of strengths in ways that make a system's weakness irrelevant. And then Valerie goes on to say, your weaknesses do not have to become an obstacle to getting what you want in life. In fact, God's strength is perfected in our weakness. And that's 2 Corinthians 12:9. Or 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. That was like just like a gigantic hug for me. I don't know about you guys, but I was like, but it's true. We do focus on those weaknesses, but guys, who do you think causes our minds to go towards those weaknesses instead of focusing on how God can use our strengths to overcome those weaknesses? God made each of us the way that we are. He knows every aspect of our personality. He knows the strengths that he's equipped us with. He did not give us, we are not a Swiss Army knife, guys. We are not supposed to have every tool needed in one person. If that were the case, we would have no need for the body of believers. We would have no need for this group here. And I think that when we realize where our strengths are and we begin to operate in them, and then we start to ask ourselves questions about how can this strength help me to overcome that weakness, it's a completely different shift. Any thoughts on that? Awesome. So, go ahead. No, please go.
I was waiting for Sharon. I could just
Sharon's
see.
just sitting down.
I'm sure she had something to say. Anyways, sorry, I'm trying out a new pair of glasses today.
I was going to ask you.
And my weakness is that my eyes are the weakness. and they're progressive. So I'm like, where's the spot? Oh, you're clear now. Okay, clear now. Anybody that has these knows exactly what I'm dealing with right now. So they might be on top of my head before we're finished here. So yeah, I think that's where the body of Christ, when when Paul talks that, some of us are hands and some of us are eyes and some of us are ears and some of us are, he doesn't say it like that, but you know what I'm saying. That we all have different giftings. We're not, right? We need each other as people. We cannot do life without, because we're not self-completed. And going back to the thought that, yeah, Satan absolutely wants to trip us up on our walk by emphasizing, well, look at here you go again, you failed, you can't do that, you loser, right? And that's where there are some things that, of course, like, there's things in my life that I didn't think I'd ever be able to do, and God has given me the strength and the ability to do. But at the same time, there are just things that I know that I can't focus on them. I can't say to myself, oh, I'll never be able to do that. Just like Janelle is learning a new skill, and she can change that from, you know what, I didn't used to know that, but I'm starting to grasp it, and it's really cool. I'm learning a new skill, right? It may never be her number one. Some of us are just innate, have these abilities, and some of us, it just takes a little longer, right? That's okay. But I think the big piece is not allowing ourselves to focus so greatly on our things that are, yeah, on our weaknesses. It's a fine line. We can't say, oh, that's just me. Like, how that, well, just accept who you are. That's just how you're going to be. No, to a certain point, no. But if I don't have, if I have one leg that's shorter than the other, I can't do anything about that. I can't do anything if I have one arm short, unless God's going to grow that back. There's just some things that may not come to me as easily, right? So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what I was going to say with that, because my eyes are
bothering you. But it just reminded me of how the world can take a good thought and completely take the pendulum and swing it completely the other way, right? So let's take the statement, I am enough, statement that drives me absolutely insane in the way that it is put out there nowadays. Because on my own, without Jesus, I'm not. I'm not. But the idea that God created me as a mom, I am enough for those kids as a mom, right? Like it shouldn't mean you are enough, you never have to change, you never have to grow, you don't need God, you don't need anybody else, you don't need to have, that's the pendulum swing that way, instead of being like, okay, you know what, I know who I am, I know who's created me, I accept my flaws just like I accept my strengths, and I choose not to focus on things that are not going to grow me. And today I have what I need inside me to complete the day. In general, it just, yeah, anyway, that might be a squirrely aside, but yes. And so she actually says, right now on page 80, she says, right now you have the strength within you to grow into the kind of woman who can accomplish all that is in your heart. Let your past successes, no matter how small, ignite the confidence, hope, and creativity that will also ignite future successes. And I think, again, we can go back to like what Jimmy was saying, that we can use comparison as an amplification of our weakness. Well, I'm not supposed to be like Sharon, but thank God I have Sharon, because then she and I can work together and use our giftings together so that we can complement one another, right? And she talks in this book about when you are collaborating with somebody, when you are leading somebody, don't give them a sole responsibility that is completely alternate to their gifting. Okay, y'all, never ask me to make a spreadsheet. I'm just going to say it right now. Do not ask me to make the spreadsheet. It will not go well. Could I do it? I guess so. But it'll probably take me a whole lot of time. I'll break out in hives and be super itchy. I'm allergic to spreadsheets. And it should be somebody, we should talk to Amy. Amy should make the spreadsheets because Amy does the numbers thing in her brain. It's just the way that Amy is, right? So don't expect people to show up in a level of strength and proficiency in a place where they just are not strong or proficient. And, you know, as a leader, then we start to think like, how can I help to spotlight somebody's strengths? Which means that we need to get to know our people well enough to know what those strength areas are so that we can spotlight those strengths. So there was a question I wanted to ask about that.
I just want to
Oh,
say that,
yeah, go ahead.
that is the that is why it's so important in the setting that we have, as we are people who live separate, but then we interact online. That little thing that Janelle is doing where, hey, share your pink drink, right? In some of the groups, right? It's a golden groups, sorry, gold and above group. But when there's these little actions where, hey, show your pink drink, or, you know, or if you're in one of my group chats, you know, tell something about it. It's so important we do that because here's the thing, you guys, I love it when I love it when the interactions become more that we're getting to know each other, and you discover something about somebody and you're so excited when you discover that thing about that person. It just makes your day. You're, no way, you can do that. No way. You're what? You, oh my goodness, you're right. It's, you guys, we totally, we almost in ourselves, we've forgotten that maybe there's something that, you know, well, yeah, I do that. Like, sure, I don't know. I can't even think of something, but I'll put, who am I going to bug? I'm going to bug, Chelsea. Okay. Chelsea, there's some things that Chelsea can do that I can't do. And when I discovered that she could do those things, I was like, no way. That's amazing. Right. You know, I just love that. And people, you're almost, people come back from there like, yes, so what? Which is really, it's a funny kind of response, because we miss the things that we can do, right? We're a bunch of people that walk around that we don't celebrate ourselves, let alone we forget to celebrate each other, right? But in the capacity that we have with the type of business we're doing and being online, it's so important that we get to know each other so that we can celebrate each other. But on top of that, use each other's gifts and talents, right? When Sharon put the whole math thing in there, sorry, again, it was in,
it's in a gold group, but we need to share it. And actually, I want Sharon to like explain it.
Let's put it in the leader lounge, whatever. That was like, for, right, just to have that,
We need to
right?
explain this. I said, could
Yeah,
somebody do the math for me? What does like 100 to 120 PV look like with a welcome pack? What does 150 PV look like? Give me some examples for these things so that we can use them so that people understand, like, oh, if I want somebody to get a credit, that's 50 per, like, credits, right? For the new, what's the word, for the new incentive. I want to know what that is so that I can suggest it so that people will be more likely to purchase more next month so that they get something like completely for free, right? And Sharon comes out with this like, like, it's almost like it just sort of fell out of her brain. Like, no problem. Maybe it took a long time, but It did not feel like it. See, and her brain was just like, oh, well, I know this because in her head, she collects information differently than my brain collects information. So that's what
Mhm.
Jimmy Lou was talking about. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's so important. That's why it's so important that we create community. It's so important that you say, hey, come on into this Zoom. Come on onto this chat. Let's get to know each other, because I think there's people out there that we just on our teams, we have not discovered yet their abilities. They probably don't even know their own abilities because again, we walk around people without, right? But yeah, we're missing out on greatness right around us.
I have a great example actually of this. Years ago when we were doing a lot of in-person training events in Saskatchewan, this was before COVID, we were doing, I don't even remember what they were calling them. But they were huge events. Corporate was spending a ton of money sending a whole lot of product, but the point was they wanted people to come and experience Plexus, and then they wanted to have certain things like food things made. And if you know me, another thing that makes me break out in hives, like spreadsheets do, is making food for other people. Sharon will be like rolling her eyes at me, but she knows this about me and she loves me anyway. And so I have a friend who's also an ambassador, who's a Red Seal chef. Actually, we have 2 of them at least on our team. Isn't that insane? I know, like, hello. And Sharon is just like a savant in the kitchen. So there's just that too. But anyway, so I call up Rebecca and I'm like, hey, there's this thing. Could you do it? And she's like, oh, absolutely no problem. I'm like, I will pay for the ingredients. Can you do it? And for her, the amount of stress that it caused her was like nil. But the other thing was is that because she got to use her giftings and something that like, and that I think we talked about this on one of our other calls about how when you exist in a space that brings you peace and rest, doing those things using your gifting, it energizes you, right? So for her to be able to make Starbucks copycat oat fudge bars, now that was on her own creation that she made out of Arlene, and she brought them, but then of course we couldn't like give them out because they weren't on the placard for the thing. We're like, okay, well that's fine. The ambassadors will just eat them all. We don't have a problem with that in the least. But it gave her a place, right? And so we need to consider that when we understand people's strengths and we invite them into the arena to use those strengths in their own specific way, it makes them more comfortable to come and exist in a place that they may have otherwise been uncomfortable in. So I want to keep going. Like, there are coaching questions in here, you guys. Like, sorry, I know I feel like I'm can I even use the term? It's not politically correct. Beating a dead horse. That's a terrible thing. I'm droning on about the same thing. But having a paper copy of the book, it's a workbook this time, you guys. And it talks about 5 areas of your life. So she's talking about career, relationships, finances, physical health and environments, and spiritual. And then she goes through questions on, this is on page 80. And it's, for career, think of a time in your work when you were particularly productive, navigated a challenge effectively, or reached an important goal. Write a description of that instance here. And then she walks you through these things. The reason why I'm loving her books so very much, and I hope you guys are finding the same thing, is that in going through the questions, the way that she's choosing to ask questions is permeating my brain. And so then when I come against a challenge or a situation, I'm finding that I'm asking myself questions in the same way that she is, and that I'm responding in a way that I wouldn't have responded previously. So I don't want to go through all of these kinds of things because it's like a seriously sitting down and thinking about, okay, well, where was a time when I did this and how did I do that and whatever. So I will try to take pictures. I didn't write in here so I could take pictures. I'll take pictures and I'll put them in the chat. But I did put some pictures in the chat about the strengths. And she talks about the VIA's list of 24 character strengths that are universally valued across all world cultures. And there's a free assessment, and it's AuthenticHappiness.com. But that's in a picture in the chat as well. And the assessment is free. Did anybody do the assessment? Sharon did the assessment. Okay, let's talk to Sharon for a minute and ask her which 5 of those things, tell us a little bit about the assessment and what you found. Like what did you find? Do you remember what your results were?
Yeah, so the assessment was a little bit tricky to find, but it is there.
Okay.
Just not like immediately right where she says. But if you dig for it, you will find it. And yeah, it was interesting. You're just asked a bunch of questions about how you feel about something, how you view yourself, what other people often tell you about yourself. It didn't take long. It didn't take 45 minutes. It took probably closer to 10.
Okay.
Right, or 15 minutes to actually fill out and do. For me, this is like kind of maybe jumping ahead. Like, do you want to know what my strengths were?
Yeah. Lay
Okay.
them on us.
Okay, so my top 5. So it divides it up because everybody possesses like these things to some capacity, these 24 things, right? But you're gonna have like stronger ones, middle ones, and like bottom end ones.
Right.
And yeah, for signature strengths for me, it was, the first one was capacity to love and be loved, spirituality, the sense of purpose and faith, social intelligence, authenticity, and love of learning. Which I'm like, I actually, to be honest, I could have probably read that list and been like, there's my top 5. Yeah.
Can you see them again, Sharon?
Yeah, like what my top 5 were?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of the strengths are listed in the chat as well.
I
Sorry.
know. I just want to hear hers. I just
Oh,
want to
sure. Okay. So capacity to love and to be loved, spirituality and a sense of purpose, faith. Number 3 is social intelligence. Number 4 is authenticity. And number 5 is a love of learning. Those all come very, very, very easy to me, right? I didn't need to take a test to tell me. Yeah.
Were they in the order that you would have said?
Yeah, actually.
Similar?
Very similar. Yeah. Yeah, no, they were quite similar. What was interesting for me was taking the test. So like with me, I get told I'm brave all the time, which I actually hate because I'm like, the alternate wasn't very good. So, you know, I didn't really have a choice. But yeah, bravery was way down for me. That was number 20. That barely made it into a middle strength. That was the last of them for me. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then your
No.
strengths must be ridiculously strong. I'm just
Well-
gonna say, because Sharon's like a world traveler and like has gone by herself. Like she's done like crazy brave things, minus like, you know, the obvious whole like going through a brain tumor, you know, being brave thing. But like I would think that bravery would have been up there. So my perception of where bravery would rank, I'd be like, wow, those other things must have been like off the charts in comparison.
Well, I think the thing is too, because I spent a lot of time thinking about this yesterday. I probably spent about 3 hours, like in this chapter, 4 hours, like during the week, thinking about it, whatever.
There's
But
the love of learning for you. That was
there's my love of learning,
There
right?
you
But
go.
I think sometimes our strengths override our weaknesses, right? Because the thing is, because like, you want to know
Yeah.
what my lowest one is I hate team anything, you guys. I hate it. I am like Enneagram 2 through and through. I get so distracted by what like everyone else might be feeling or thinking or where they're at, that I'm like, I don't like this, right? But the thing is I love people. I love people so, so, so much. And that's my favorite one, right? Or my biggest strength. And it kind of balances out. So even though I may not naturally gravitate towards a team and working on a team, like team sports, terrifying, right? At the same time, I love people so much that I'm going to do that, and it's going to make me better, right? And I always end up in teams and in people and in whatever, even though, you know, if you don't have your strength balancing out your weakness, it's not what I would have chosen or would gravitate towards, right? So that was interesting for me. And bravery is actually the same, because I've done crazy stuff, right? Plan on doing a lot more. I'm having a hiatus to have some babies and stuff, but my capacity like to love people and my sense of adventure and appreciation of beauty, it overrides the fact that I'm kind of like really overly careful, and I weigh costs and benefits like you wouldn't believe, very carefully all the time. Yeah.
So Sharon, can I ask you a question? If we were thinking in a church, this is how I think about a lot of things in life, in a church community. Would you be the person up at the front when the welcoming committee, or would you be the person that's already sitting down in church and waiting for the service to start on time?
I'd be the person that was sitting down, actually. Yeah, I would be the person sitting down, because the thing is too, like with a lot of this stuff, because I mean, personalities are so intricate, right? I wait to be invited. I'm not going to shove myself on something, right? I mean, like even leadership and stuff like that, I can lead, absolutely, you guys, but I wait to be invited. I'm not going to be like, "Ooh, I'll lead that," right? First, no way, right? I'm so happy to defer to somebody else, right? Because also, guess what my lowest one was? Is I'm not driven. Which I found really funny. But then as I started thinking about, because I'm like, I have a lot of grit actually. Like if something's important to me, I stick to it and that's it. And I'm in it for the long game.
Oh
But
yeah.
it has to be like the strengths, it has to align with my strengths and values, which is going to pull up like those bottom, like what they would maybe call weaknesses, right? Those bottom ones, right? So I can do it, but there has to be the correct motivation in order for me to overcome that weakness, if that makes any sense, right? So I could be a church greeter just fine. Of course I could, right? But I'm more likely to be sitting in the pew on time and actually strike up a conversation with the harried mom next to me with the little kid
There you go.
that's misbehaving, and then start talking and make her feel comfortable and find out where she's from and find out half of her life story and then invite her over for lunch, right? And
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I was like, Sharon's sitting in the pew, but she's gonna find somebody who needs somebody that day. Like you're gonna have that perception, right? So valuable. Oh, so good.
yeah, so that's how I operate. But anyways, it was very interesting to do. I would highly recommend you do it. And it was very interesting to go through those questions that Janelle was just talking about saying, because it always is asking you, when are you at your best? So I actually listed it out, went back and looked, when am I at my best? Right. And then my signature strengths. And it was very, very funny to see how they would balance each other out, and how times I'm at my best is often when I'm doing teamwork, right? Or I'm living in community or reaching out to community, right? Even though I'm like, ugh, teamwork, just let me do it by myself, leave me alone, right? So it's so interesting, I think, how God has done that. And I bet you everybody else's list would be, you know, different strengths, different weaknesses, different times, you know, that things have come out. But I bet you everybody else's would be very similar, where, isn't this funny how some of the times we're at our best is when we're actually going in those weaknesses but not focusing on it, also using those strengths, right?
Yeah.
And letting them balance each other. Anyways, it was interesting.
And in learning more about these things, as we discover stuff like this about ourselves, and like what Sharon was saying, you know, going through all those questions, whatever, not only is she learning about herself, but she's gaining perspective on other people that she'll have the opportunity to lead, which I just love. That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that, Sharon, and for taking the time and then being willing to share all of that with us too. So the list, I'm just going to read the list so we have it on the recording in case somebody is looking and they're not in the chat or whatever. But the list of character strengths. So if you hear any of these, or if you've read, I'd love to either, like, if you put them in the chat, that would be great. If you could put, you know, maybe a couple of your strengths that we could share with one another, that would be great. Appreciation of beauty and excellence, bravery and valor, capacity to love and be loved, caution, prudence, and discretion, citizenship, teamwork, and loyalty, creativity, ingenuity, and originality, curiosity and interest in the world, fairness, equity, and justice, forgiveness and mercy, gratitude, honesty, authenticity, and genuineness, hope, optimism, and future-mindedness, humor and playfulness, industry, diligence, and perseverance, judgment, critical thinking, and open-mindedness, kindness and generosity, leadership, love of learning, modesty and humility, perspective or wisdom, self-control and self-regulation, social intelligence, spirituality, sense of purpose and faith, zest, enthusiasm, and energy. Anyone want to share any of theirs? I don't see the chat open at all.
I can share.
Yeah.
Just getting back to the list so that I can have it in front of me. I would say that capacity to love and be loved is would be one of the stronger ones. Creativity, ingenuity, and originality. Curiosity and interest in the world, which I didn't realize would be a strength. Look, isn't everyone curious and
No.
interested?
No, not
Wow.
everyone is curious.
Right, but there you go. I'm like, oh, it's a strength. I am always so curious and interested in, like, I want to learn about this random thing. And Reiner's like, are you listening? Why are you watching? Anyways, a documentary on a dead celebrity from a long time ago. I'm like, it's just so interesting.
I know Addison and I got stuck watching a YouTube video yesterday about a mansion that was abandoned, and I'm like looking at all their stuff, like looking at all the stuff they left behind, and I'm like, oh, it's so interesting. Sorry.
So
Weird.
that's me. So I have a collage of random information that I know.
Yeah.
And people be like, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know. I just know it.
None of the pertinent stuff stuck, but all of the random facts completely in here. So I'm gonna interrupt just for a quick second here as you're talking, because I'm wondering, as you guys read through those, were you able to pick out one? No, this is a two-part question. Were you able to pick out one that you were like, well, that's my spouse right there. That's my spouse. And was one of your top strengths complementary or alternate? Anyone want to share that?
For me, one of my top ones was kindness and generosity that I
Absolutely.
noticed. And that I would say is one of Kelly's, my husband's top ones too.
Absolutely. I'd say that too. Yeah. Sharon, what did you pick out as Ben's strength? Sorry, is he within earshot? Hi, Ben.
Yeah. Oh no, he's not here. He's still in bed.
Oh, he's still.
He said he
Oh,
had
right,
to
'cause
get up
it's
early this morning.
7:45 in
No
BC,
idea.
and Sharon's here.
Yeah. It was interesting because my bottom ones are probably Ben's top ones, right? So leadership, right? Like it's people seek him out to lead, like industry, like that diligence, that perseverance, being driven. He's super driven. You could have literally flipped it. right? The whole thing. It was actually just quite funny for me, actually. Right. Whereas some of the stuff that I'm like, well, it comes so easy for me. He's like, what is that like weird fluff? I don't have time for that. Right. You go have your moment. That's fine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Totally.
Mhm.
I know I'm reading this and the fairness, equity, and justice, like that is my husband. And I am on the forgiveness and mercy side. Not that he's not merciful. He's very merciful. And like, but those two things, I am definitely there is a division between the two there.
Yeah, like as I'm just reading this, I would say that for my husband, it would be the judgment, critical thinking, and open-mindedness would be on the one side for him. And then I'm more of the hope, optimism, and future mindedness, right? Like,
Mhm.
right, like he is more where I'll be optimistic about something, but then we balance each other out because I'm like, let's shoot the moon, right? And he's like,
Realism versus optimism. Like I'm and then they
listen,
marry each
honey,
other.
we, like, so we balance each other out, right? Because the credit cards would have been completely maxed by now if we were both the same person, or we both
Right.
would have been, because an idea will come to me. Let's go do, actually, that is really tempered in me. I think I've been able to, as I've aged, I've been able to like stop myself and like, let's think through this a little bit longer before you make this choice, right? Like that's gotten better as I've aged. But yeah, it's right. How, just, I think, disc, anybody's done the disc. I'm a true I, like a true I as a true could be, like on the disc. I'm an I and I'm like on the outer side. And Jeremy's he's a D and he's like a very true D, right?
Which
So
is like order and like
yes, thinking through things, right? Like
critical
leadership,
thinking.
critical thinking, right? Like having very good uh I can't anyways.
Most just FYI, if you don't know the disc test, most people have like two letters that they are. They're a this primary and then there's something else. Jimmy and I, we're eyes. We are as I can be. We're almost poor Sherry is like an SC. And so the two of us are woo.
It's
Very
if you ever get to if you ever see that there's a training, I know that Sherry does the
Sherry does
training.
them. We should talk to her about doing
Sherry does the training. If you ever get to, it's very insightful. It's very helpful for you in your business, but just in life in general, you just know like, hey, this is where I fit. This is where I'm gonna be, most effective. Yeah.
So I have a question that I want to give us some time to answer here. So on page 93, she's talking about how she started to write a book and she began writing a book and never finished it, like kind of fell off the wagon on it. And then like just didn't really have anything to say. And then 4 years later, she started again. And the reason that she was able to continue was she had people that were championing her to do it because they saw like they championed my vision and asked how they could help. They saw it and therefore I saw it more clearly because I could see the invisible. I had enough faith to take the leap and pursue my dreams. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When you begin to see your strengths, you give yourself permission to hope for bigger possibilities. So I think it would be really great for you to look at who your champions are. So make a little note to do that. But here is my in-depth question. Because we are all leaders on this screen. And so as we step into leadership roles and we bring new people in who also want to step into leadership roles, we may encounter people who don't have a lot of champions in their lives. Oftentimes when we bring people into this type of circle, we will find people who are like, wait a second, positive people actually exist. I thought that they were unicorns. And all of a sudden you're finding that their entire circle of influence is not where you would want to be fostering a positive mindset, or almost impossible to create a thriving mindset in general, like kind of the crabs in the bucket concept, right? Where everybody has to stay down and the mindset. So my question for you is, how do you encourage somebody like that who is pulled down by their community? Where do they go find encouragement? Where would you send somebody? You have a brand new ambassador, they see what you do, they see your mindset, they know they want something different for their lives. They know they want something different for their lives, but they don't have a roadmap to get there because they've never seen it done. You have just introduced them to the existence. Where do you send them? What do you give to them? What do you do?
I think it depends on what stage they're at and what they already have strengths in already. But for some of the things that are pretty vital for making this work, I tell them to go follow a couple people that I find are really helpful to follow. Like Emily Roberts, I just love her stuff, and she's moving along and she's doing the thing, right? And so I've enjoyed watching her and I've learned so much. And so I send people to her. So people go follow her. And then I also send people Christina Williams and Brittany Howard trainings. And I'm like, if you if you just watch this stuff, like, I don't know which of these you need at what point you need, but anything that comes out of this channel, just watch it. And the leadership podcast.
That's great. Absolutely. Sharon.
So yeah, very recently, I think for me, number one is getting to know the person, right? And where they're at. And then you can speak words of encouragement over them, right? But also, I have someone who I actually recommended. I'm like, are you a reader? Right? And yep, she reads, right? So I got her to read soundtracks, and
That's
she
a good
found it
one.
very, very helpful, right? Very helpful. Yeah, and then contacting her or putting her into contact with other Plexus people. And I think, if it's a person of faith, like drawing on that as well too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a phenomenal book. If you guys haven't, I feel like we almost need to do it again because it's just so impactful for mindset.
My husband still reminds me of it all the time. He's like, that's a broken record, Chelsea.
And you're like, thank you. I did not need that right now.
Like, come on.
Oh. Yeah, and the other thing to remember is when we're creating relationships with people and showing them how to do these things, we end up being fairly intimately connected, because who talks about poop with somebody that they don't know? Like, I mean, besides us, like we feel like that's normal, but a lot of people don't, or talking about struggles and heart issues and all those things. People can become very interconnected through this business and through these relationships. But the cautionary tale to this is you do not need to be all things for all people. Sure, it works out okay when you have a team of 5. You can be there and be on call for 5 people 24 hours a day if you would like, but I would not recommend it, because you probably have other people in your life that need you too. And then you're getting exhausted for the counsel and the therapy that you're providing for 5 people. But exactly what Sharon and Chelsea shared is having resources, even having a little notes tab in your phone with like resources for mindset, easy things, right? The podcast, here's a couple accounts that I always follow. Even if you create your own board, like a tab in boards, and be able to be like, okay, this is what I send to people for mindset. These are the books, like kind of, and you can even put like stages, right? Like this book, I think a lot of people would get a ton out of. But I think like for higher thinking, I would definitely suggest this to somebody who's coming in who already has background in leadership, background in leading people, those types of things. I might send people to her first book first before recommending this one, or I might send them, like Sharon said, to soundtracks first before doing this, or, you know, even asking questions like, what kind of music do you listen to? I mean, maybe you find a lot of people who are really happy, positive people that listen to death metal. I don't. It's just not, I don't feel like it aligns super well with positive and purpose, but I could just be judgmental because it's not something that fills my soul. Being really careful as to what is going into your brain. It's just like if you've got kids, right? If your teen is like grumpy and depressed, you're like, so what media have you been listening to lately? What movies are you watching? You watching Schindler's List on repeat? Because I feel like that wouldn't be healthy for a good mindset, like once a year maybe. But you know, just those types of things that sometimes we need a note to remind us how to walk somebody through. But the other thing is getting them to come to book club, getting them to come to team calls, getting them involved in the community so that they don't feel alone. And then you can defer and be like, oh yeah, you know, you should follow this person. You should follow Sharon. She's super interesting. I love how she writes. I know you'll get a lot of a lot out of what she shares. And then they've got a personal connection with Sharon because Sharon comes to book club on Saturday morning and they know her. And I'm not telling my new person that they need to go and become Sharon's new best friend. That's not what I'm recommending. I am just layering more positive people and building a visual community around them of actual real human beings that live in an alternate way to the way that they do, so they can start building their own virtual community of other people. And so then they start attracting new people, because if we're going by attraction marketing and this person essentially builds a completely new network because the other people that they're attracting from day one with their old mindset are not going to be the people that are going to want to come with them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you need to help them build those bridges, but just be really careful that you don't overcommit yourself to one person. And that's the only like counseling is never a bad idea either. It's just saying. I want to leave us this morning because we're already 9:58. So appreciate you guys all being here so much. Remember that successful women think differently. They're able to notice when their own behaviors lead them away from success rather than towards it. So that's under the topic of, you know, should you ignore your weakness? Well, no, we're not ignoring them. We're focusing on our strengths, but we're still being aware of where the pitfalls are, the things that can draw us down, right? And so when we're aware of it, we can fix it. We can kind of turn the other direction and make a course correction. Or you share your books with your husband and then he says, that's a broken record, Chelsea, right? Which can be a helpful course correction too. But again, the other thing too is surrounding yourself with really positive sidelines who are not yes men or yes women, who would actually be able to say to you, do I have your permission to say something to you? Is this really where we want to be going right now? I don't know that it is. Anyway, great conversation today, you guys. Next week, we are building our muscle of self-control. I know you're all super excited to come for that part. I'm sure that there will be no spankings done reading that chapter this week. Yeah, so thank you guys for your time. We will be seeing you, well, before then, but Tuesday night, team call, 8:30. And yeah, have a great Saturday. I'm going to go watch my son play basketball. See you.